But before we get started with that, how about some wins and recognitions for today? What do people want to brag about? Marie.
I'm a new certified diabetes care and education specialist in the diabetes and nutrition education sector. Jody Christensen, she passed on Friday.
Was it Jody Christensen? Passed her certifications in diabetic education? Jolene. Jolene. Oh, I know who that is. Yes, thank you. So, yeah. I saw Vicki first.
So HIM completed our scan project, so all of the file charts are now available through Epic, electronic record for all of their old charts that used to be in file.
So HIM, what was that?
Zumba classes start next week. Lots of space now.
Lots of space up in HIM now because they just finished their scanning project. Vicki, how many documents were scanned? Do you have an idea?
8 million, or no, 2 million.
2 million.
200,000.
2,800,000. Congratulations to you and your team. Woo. Darla.
So speaking of certifications, Emily Law passed her certification in healthcare quality.
Congratulations, Emily. Amy.
On acute rehab, we've gone over 200 days without a fall injury.
Over 200 days on acute rehab without a fall with injuries. Congrats. Rhonda.
We had Tammy White wanted to recognize Antonio in her lab. We had a couple weeks ago, we had an ectopic pregnancy that came and had a large amount of blood loss. They had to implement the mass transfusion protocol, and he was very helpful in guiding them through what they needed to give next each time. So we just really appreciated his help.
Very good. Is Melanie or Emily here? Did you hear that, Antonio? Okay. Melissa.
I just want to recognize and thank Tammy Stegman for helping with our scholarship committee. In fact, they just met yesterday, I believe it was. Reviewed about 45-ish scholarship applications for about a dozen awards. So we have that list now. I'll be reaching out to leaders to make sure, that the fact that they still work here or whatever. And then we will be scheduling surprise, yeah, you don't get it, Carrie. We will be scheduling some surprise presentations to those employees. So once we do that, we will then follow up with those folks who were not selected. So right away, it seems like it's been going on a while. People are asking, where are we? That's where we're at. But thank you to Tammy for doing that wonderful work.
Thank you. Anyone else? Evan was cleaning your glasses. I thought you were raising your hands double. All right, no. Jill.
Oncology had 2 more nurses pass their chemo certification test, and so they are now in the process of being checked off on administering chemo that can do so independently. That was Austin Larson and Gretchen Ostad.
Congrats to Austin and Gretchen. Tammy.
So now you said something to me that I'll piggyback a little bit, but we have 11 interns that will be here this summer. One of which is an extension, or 2 of, I'm sorry, of which are an extension, so they're currently here. So that's exciting that we have 11 interns that will be throughout the organization, and huge thanks to Foundation for the support of us being able to do that and offer that.
Thank you. Melanie.
Yes, just, I know it was earlier this month, but we had our CLIA inspection for the lab. Went awesome. We had 0 deficiencies, but also just a big shout out to cardiopulmonary and cardiac cath lab because they're involved with that inspection too, and they both did a great job.
Congratulations. It's been great. Who else? Joelle.
Karen might have already given her shout out, but Chris
and the electrical breaker is here for that project. So we might actually kind of have a move-in date. Woohoo! So we're just gonna say summer. But more information to come about that behavioral health unit opening. But I think we can safely say sometime in summer now. Whitney.
Pharmacy and cardiology clinic were recently rounded on with EOC rounding, and they had no findings. So no expired items. So great job on those departments.
Woohoo! Nice job, Nicole. Nice job, Doug.
Looking for them for best practice ideas, but we already seen one in cardiology clinic, and that's writing the expiration date with a Sharpie marker right on the hand sanitizer, since that's like a big item for us. So I'll be sharing some communication of what we can all do in our own departments to do that.
Good job, Nicole. Anyone else? Otherwise, I might bring Ron down here. He's going to help introduce our NRC partners.
Be careful about skipping steps over there. I'm not used to be able to skip steps. Not anymore. All right, so NRC Health is our partner for patient experience. We meet with them on a regular basis all year long, and then come around this time of year, they expand their team, we expand our team, we bring in the HR folks, and we gear up, and the medical staff credentialing office too. Sally and her team are involved with this, and we come together and we administer both the provider and the workforce engagement survey. As you all know, when the survey was began administered, you lost access to your workforce and provider engagement results. It's not to keep it a big secret or a big surprise like it turns out to be. It's just a matter of we don't want to see them as they're coming in because we can make false judgments and overreact to things. So today is the day. You should be getting your results turned back on today if you don't already have them. Give them a chance at least till tomorrow before you start calling me and say you don't have them. But anyway, so today's the day. They're here. The team is here that I work with. Lauren Dermott is the Vice President of Strategy. She's here to present the results, and with her is Margaret Bluford, I think, and she's the gal who just keeps everything running for us and keeps everything together. So without further ado, I turn it over to the NRC team. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ron. So we have a wonderful presentation for your team today. I'm very excited to share the results with you all. I'm not sure if with this room that you all are in, it will be good to ask questions and have some dialogue. So if you do have dialogue that you want to share with your colleagues, feel free to do that amongst yourselves. We'll have some pockets of time in that today. If you have questions for us, run on up to the podium and let us know. It's probably the best way for us to hear you. So with that, I will go ahead and share the presentation. Let me move screen so I can still see everybody here. All right, so we are going to be focusing on the employee engagement piece of the results today. If you can't hear me, if something comes across odd, if I need to slow down at all, please pop that into the chat and Margaret can let me know. Want to make sure you all get the best out of this presentation today. And in starting off our conversation, I always like to define what engagement is first. So kind of set the stage of really how we want to be thinking through employee engagement results today. So NRC defines engagement as the simultaneous employment of an individual's preferred self through physical, cognitive, and emotional means. So in essence, what we're saying is that employee engagement involves the employee's hands, their head, and their heart. But when we say preferred self, what do we really mean? What is a preferred self? And I think that's a really important terminology when understanding employee engagement results, because we know, whether you're a leader or a frontline staff, all employees are faced with countless decisions of how to behave at work, how to present themselves, what foot they want to put forward, what's most important to them. So when an individual invests their preferred self, they express their real identity, their thoughts, their feelings. And through all that, what we want to analyze today is the trends and the way to look at results through that preferred self that the employee came into and filled out this survey with. And I focus so heavily on that before actually jumping into results, because I think it's a good reminder that employee engagement surveys are very much perception, right? They're impactful. We need to understand the results, and we need to honor the perceptions of the employees who chose to fill out the survey and give that feedback. So hopefully you'll see that as a consistent theme throughout our conversation today. But before I dive into the results, I'll give you all a few reminders of how we set up this survey and how we're scoring results. I'm sure if you've done this with us before, this is not news to you. But just as a reminder, here are the dimensions that we're capturing on the survey. And these are essentially the buckets that NRC thinks are most important to employees. They're very specific, and they're what we think should be the focus areas when asking employees their feedback. So we'll take a look at these today, and then we'll also look at the behaviors that are driving these dimensions and where you can have the most impact internally with the associates that you work with. Second piece is how we score. So for all of the questions on your survey, we do use positive scoring. So if it's an 11-point scale, it's using those 9s and 10s responses. Other questions, it's using strongly agree and agree. And then you do have that fun Net Promoter Score question that we'll dive into here. That's a slightly different calculation, but we'll dive into that when we look at those results. So for the most part, anytime you're looking at a positive score, this is exactly how we're scoring those measures. And then the last piece of this is just a quick overview of your response rates year over year as we've done these studies. And one of the main things I want to call out is the celebration around your response rates. So you have a very high response rate compared to our average response rate across our employee surveys. And the biggest next step to this is to celebrate that internally. And that can look a lot of different ways, right? Simply thanking associates for taking the time to fill out the survey, announcing publicly the response rates and saying that you appreciate the feedback that people took the time to put in for you guys. So when you're looking at this, I want you to remember that this number is absolutely a celebration of everyone who is involved in your organization and took the time out of their day to provide feedback for you. So you don't have to answer this question out loud, but be thinking about if you've celebrated this internally yet or not. And if you haven't, making sure you have solid plans to do so, so employees feel acknowledged that they took the time to do these surveys and the results that are coming out of them. All right, so let's get into why we're all having a conversation today. We're first going to look at the data side, so the impact that the dimensions and the behaviors have on employee engagement, and then we'll wrap up our conversation today with some comment themes that we wanted to pull out and highlight as well. So the first piece of this are the two questions that are really driving the bigger picture of employee engagement. And those are your overall rating and your likelihood to recommend. So when we look at these, the most important thing to remember is that we want to understand the big picture. We want to talk about it organizationally, but change ultimately happens when we look at what drives these numbers. So that is why I want to spend a majority of our time today talking about what's driving these overall measures, what behaviors are represented, what are opportunities to lean into. So think about this specific slide and this data as more of your 30,000-foot view. So taking some time to kind of look at this, in the blue is the most recent results. I'm curious if anybody wants to answer what stands out to you here, or what do you think are driving these scores today? Anybody have any thoughts around that?
Anyone? Bueller? Any comments? Nope, I think we're good.
All right. Perfect. Well, thanks for hopping on to let me know. So then my ask of this information is really to think about what the next best step is, right? Because we tend to take employee engagement responses, we go to those top drivers of recommending it as a place to work or overall rating, we communicate those out, and the first thing folks focus on is that, oh, our score went down, or our score isn't where I think it should be. And I want to challenge that narrative a bit and say that's not the right conversation to have with this data, right? We have to acknowledge the movement, but in a bigger sense, we have to acknowledge the things that are driving that. And if we're making positive, impactful changes based on that, instead of chasing metrics at this top level. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I do have some information that I'll just share with you that we're seeing in the market overall with healthcare systems is, we have seen patient experience scores as well as engagement scores either decrease slightly over the past couple years or essentially remain steady in most areas. And we don't really have to say this, but staffing shortages, employee health, competition for talent, surges, COVID, right? All of these things are still seen as heavy drivers of engagement scores and feedback. And we've seen kind of two schools around this over the past probably 18 months or so. We've seen organizations say, okay, we know our scores are reflecting lower or negatively or less than, so we're going to move that piece to the side. We don't want any more burnout. We don't want staff to feel it. So we're not going to talk about it right now until those scores are better. And then we have the other camp who have really embraced how the scores are moving and had open dialogues with staff and really helped them understand where this is coming from or communicated action plans and next steps. And that latter group, the ones who lean into that conversation regardless of the numbers, are the organizations who are seeing better cultural alignment. They're seeing more engaged staff, less turnover. So my message or my ask to this team is continue to have these conversations. Don't shy away from them, no matter what the numbers tell you year over year, because we do know from research that an engaged staff doesn't need the scores to be in the 90s to feel like they're part of a great organization. They just need that communication and those active next steps on what the organization or what leaders are doing to really address those things. All right, so moving on to NPS, this is one area I really want to pause and make sure this team celebrates broadly. So as a reminder, NPS or Net Promoter Score is essentially a loyalty calculation. So we take your promoters, so those people who answered 9 or 10 on the survey, and we subtract your detractors, anyone who answered 0 to 6. And because of that calculation, seeing a lower NPS score than, say, an overall rating or a would recommend is pretty normal because of the way it's calculated. So what we want to say is, if my Net Promoter Score is strong, it means that my employees are talking to their friends and family, are talking to their community, not only about the place that they work, but they're recommending that those people close to them in their lives are coming in for care because they believe in the organization. So the celebration really comes from looking at where your numbers are sitting. So obviously we love the 9s and 10s. Those are what we talk about the most. But for Mary Greeley, you actually have a really strong 7 and 8 group as well. So those are kind of the passives. It doesn't mean they're detractors or they're saying negative things or they don't like working for Mary Greeley, but it's just saying they're kind of living in that middle ground right now. So the conversation and the impact should really be around how to move the 7s and 8s to 9s and 10s. And that can simply look like taking some of the things that we're identifying today and communicating those broadly, setting up action plans so that when someone thinks about Mary Greeley in totality and talks about them in the community, they're saying things like, not everything's perfect, and that's any business I work for, but I trust my leadership team to take positive steps and to really support me. And so I know this is a place I not only want to work, but a place I'm going to recommend to others to either work at or come in for care. So if you haven't already had this conversation, I know some of you are seeing this information for the first time. I would absolutely support this with your staff and frontline leaders. I would have conversations around the strong NPS. And for your internal knowledge, we did add in the NRC average and the 75th percentile NPS for employee engagement scores, and you're currently performing above both of those numbers. So that's absolutely a testament to the work that you all are doing internally to support the staff that you have. All right, so let's go on to the dimension view. So we're going to spread out all of the dimensions we captured in the employee engagement survey. And I'll pause here. Is there any surprise around these in 2023 or anything that stands out to you?
No comments.
All right, well, I'll keep going then. So one question we get a lot of times when viewing this data is, what is everybody else doing in the workforce engagement space? What are some common best practices? And over the past year, we've seen a really strong trend for 3 consistent best practices. And I love this because internally, NRC actually aligns really well with these. So these are some things we are doing for our associates, and we're seeing some really great conversation around them. So if you're not doing these today, they're definitely things to keep in mind or talk about whether or not it fits within your culture. The first one is access to external coaches. So outside of your organization, what are coaches you can bring in or partner with to provide value to associates based on comments or things they feel like they're not getting today? And the great thing about external coaches is, other than pairing with them, you're not employing someone to do that work. You're not trying to set up a bunch of sessions, and you're giving accountability to your associates to say, we have this resource. You told us this is something you really want and is powerful to you. So it is now your opportunity to use that resource for whatever you need to. So external coaches is the first one. The second is work-life wellness programs. So not work-life balance. I think we're trying to retire that across the board, right? It doesn't really fit well into consumerism today. But instead, we want to look at how we can balance life wellness to promote work wellness. And those are things like gym memberships, tuition reimbursement, maybe lunch break walks. NRC does a Wednesday lunch break. So every Wednesday, there's 1 hour that people are allowed to block their calendars. Everybody as a group goes for a walk when it's nice outside, and it gives them a little bit of break to communicate with staff, to really connect with folks, and then hop on back to work. So it's one thing that we've kept around that's really been great. So those are just some ideas on work-life wellness. And then the last piece of that, and this is a little more big picture, but it's the idea of a community. So what are things you can be doing as an organization to feel like you are part of something bigger than your role or your tasks? And this is so important because I think whether you're a frontline staff or a leader, you can get bogged down in the tasks that you have to do every day, right? So you can say things like, my success comes from checking these boxes. But that doesn't necessarily mean you have work fulfillment. So how can you build community programs, maybe book clubs or focus groups or things that get associates out of their task-oriented role and makes them feel like they're a part of the culture of the organization? And I'm happy to send those over. I know that was a lot of talking at this group, so I can absolutely send those ideas over to you so you can think about them further. But we'll switch gears a little bit here and walk through the 2 custom questions that you all ask on your employee survey and some of the responses we're seeing from those. So the first custom question is around, I regularly have one-on-one meetings with the person I report to. So looking at this data, think about, you don't have to answer today with us, but think about what your next steps are now that you have this data in front of you, and remind yourselves why you asked this question. So what was the goal of asking this? Was it because you felt like these weren't actually happening? Did you feel like maybe you weren't having time to schedule these? Whatever that is there something within that that you can adjust? But the great news on this custom question is it does look like a majority of your associates do feel like they have regular one-on-one meetings, they have touch points in a way to talk about things or express themselves. So you do have a majority of your employees saying they agree or strongly agree with this custom question. And then the second custom question is that action was taken as a result of last year's employee engagement survey. Now, when this type of custom question is asked, there's a lot of variance on how it's being interpreted. So I want to address that right away on here and say that, for Mary Greeley, you have agree and strongly agree, you have a good amount in there, but your largest bucket is neither. And that's not a bad thing, right? That's an opportunity to understand why people feel it's neither. Most of the time, what I'm hearing from a lot of organizations is it's not because action wasn't actually taken. It's because of the communication plan or the way action was taken, where employees either didn't understand that that change was based on feedback from employee engagement results, they were too busy to pay attention, or it wasn't followed up on. So maybe it was initially announced in a meeting or a town hall, but then it was never followed up on for the rest of the year. So when you're looking at these results, think through how your communication is on action plans and what you may want to change or adjust moving forward to make sure that employees can say, yes, they communicated that to me, and I'm getting regular updates on that initiative. So I feel like my opinions were heard and action was taken on them. And then the second piece of this is changing the narrative a little bit. So outside of that communication piece, I came to you today with an example of what another organization did and found a lot of success with. Again, I will send this over post our conversation today, but they use something called the multi-list approach that really worked well for them. And it helped to prioritize opportunities in different buckets to make it very clear what they were working on and what they weren't working on based on feedback. So let's say, for example, you have a meeting with your frontline workers, staff leaders, managers, and you tell them that you're going to take all of the opportunities you learned from the employee engagement surveys, and you're going to put them into 3 lists. So the first list is what you're actually going to commit to for the rest of this year. So these are the ones you're going to make action plans around. You're going to absolutely either find solutions or find a better way forward. And you're going to limit this list. So you're going to focus on about 2 or 3 key items. We know focusing on too many more than that can mean it's too much work and things don't get done as well. So 2 or 3 is typically the sweet spot. Your second list is going to be a list of great ideas that cannot be committed to today, but you're still going to write them down. And you're going to explain why they're not what we want to call today commits, right? It could be budgetary restraints, time commitments, maybe they're secondary opportunities that don't hold as much weight for engaging associates. So you're saying, I've heard you, here are the other things that we have learned, we just can't commit to them today. And it's either maybe next quarter, maybe next year, maybe it turns out this theme worked itself out through something else that we're doing, but it's at least acknowledging some of those themes. And then the last list is great ideas that need to be socialized with peer groups. And this is the ones where you're not sure what the next best step is, whether it's a high priority item or not. So you say, I'm going to take this and I'm going to collaborate on this list to gain more information about what the ask is, what needs to change. And then I'm going to decide if it goes on that first list of absolute commits, or it goes on the next list of, I may commit to this in the future, but it's not a today commit. So again, just one example of a way you can ensure that employees feel not only heard, but followed up with when they take employee engagement surveys. You may already have things in place that work well for you, but one goal should be looking at this data to take the neither column and understand what those associates need to feel like you're taking action on some of the results you're getting from employee engagement surveys. All right, so the last thing I want to look at on the data side before we go into comments and calls to action are your strengths and opportunities. So as a reminder, your opportunities are the lowest scoring items when compared to our NRC Health database, whereas strengths are your highest scoring items. So one thing to keep in mind is just because something is on the opportunities list doesn't automatically mean you're not doing well in it. It's just the ones on the survey that came out slightly lower than they have before and slightly lower than what we see as an average in our database. And you can take that any way you want to. So let's look at the strengths first. One thing to do on this list is to understand how you're going to capitalize on these strengths moving forward. So celebrate them internally, absolutely talk about them, and then have conversations around how to keep them as strengths. So what are you doing today that's contributing to some of these? What can you continue to do to make sure these stay strengths for your organization? And tie them into conversations you're having, like I said, in town halls, in quarterly meetings, on public boards, if you want to display them. I think your top strength speaks really, really well to the culture that you've been able to build, especially through COVID and some of the things that I'm sure you guys are struggling with, to have a great score around core values aligning with the values of employees says that people are leaning in and believe in what Mary Greeley is putting out there. And that's absolutely a strength to celebrate with associates moving forward. So that's a great next step for this team. I also like the next one, I talk up this organization to my friends as a great place to work, right? That's absolutely something that associates should be saying. It means it's a good work environment. And then the last piece, equally important, I have the tools I need to do my job effectively. So again, look at these and understand what's driving them and how to keep them in the strengths column. And then on to some opportunities. So a few things that popped out to me on this are one, with the communication piece. So communication among people I work with is never a problem. We see communication areas typically a little bit lower. And whether that's leader to associate communication, leader to leader, associate to associate, right? We know that communication can break down a little bit, especially when there is staff turnover, when there's burnout, when there's really, really busy, difficult times, we tend to skimp a little bit on the communication piece. So NRC has a ton of great communication resources on our resources page online. We have huddle videos around empathetic communication. We also have a person internally that advocates for us as far as communication goals. She holds great workshops. So there's a few tools we can help with if you would like some additional information on the communication piece. And then for the other two around pay and around benefits, these are a little bit touchier items, I think, in employee engagement results, right? It's a little harder to call to action on these. It takes a lot more movement, a lot more planning. So one thing I want to tell this group is we hear a myth a lot about how there's no room for difference in pay and benefits. Right, that seems to be a really big conversation we're having a lot. But actually, we have seen organizations adjust or right-size their pay and benefits due to COVID and workforce engagement. So when you get this argument or when you get into this conversation, know that there are organizations out there, and this might be Mary Greeley as well, that have made positive improvements in this space, even during hard times. So if this group would like more information on some of the key findings we have around that, we have a wonderful 2-page document that's really easy to read through about some best practices in those conversations. And I'd be happy to supply that if that's something that would be beneficial. All right, so on to comments and calls to action. So I wanted to pause here a little bit before diving into specific comments and just say that this team has great feedback from your associates on what is impacting your results from a data perspective. We're about to get into the comment piece of this. And as a reminder, it's so important to look at the full picture. So not just the data and how it's moving, not just the negative pieces of the data, right? We want to celebrate the fact that associates showed up and did their survey and provided their feedback. We want to thank them for that. We want to honor their opinions. And we want to make sure that we're highlighting the positive more than we're highlighting the negative, and not because we're trying to hide it. But the positive is what's going to continue to drive your culture forward. And it will remind associates the great things that are happening at Mary Greeley with folks. So keep that in mind as you guys are having these conversations. Look at the patient comments, look at the data, and paint a full picture and remember to celebrate the great things that are going on. So looking at themes, we all know how powerful comments are, right? We talk about it in the patient experience space, I think on an hourly basis sometimes. And it's the same story for employees, right? Every employee has their own story. And what's important to know as leaders, it's our job to not react to comments with emotion, not to say, you know, John Smith, you left this comment, tell me why you left it this way, right? That's the opposite of what we want to do when people give us their time and their thoughts. But we want to make sure that we remember this is employee perception. And this is the truth in the current moment that they took this survey, right? This was how they were feeling about the things that we asked them about. So we want to make sure we are honoring their experience, we're thanking them for providing their feedback, and through conversations, we're still respecting their opinions. Now, their opinions don't have to be right or wrong, but we do have to acknowledge that they gave them. So in essence of that, we want to focus on forward progress. We want to look at the positive comment themes. So within the comment space, I would encourage you all, if you haven't done so already, I know you're getting access now, read through all the comments that you have, understand what direction you want to take with those, right? What themes are present, maybe some things that jumped out at you that you do want to address, but focus on them in a way that's not punitive and saying, you know, why did you say this way, right? We can all have better conversations. And then the last piece of this I'll say is focus on maybe the top 4 things and how to address them. Again, that goes back to kind of goal setting and action planning. If you try and boil the ocean, you won't get very far. So pick the things that are most impactful and can really drive change or drive positive conversation. And remember to celebrate the positive pieces of that. So wrapping all this up, I want to leave this team with some examples of comments that our research team handpicked because we thought they were the most impactful to this conversation. So I hope the screen you're viewing is large. I'm going to be silent for about 30 seconds and let you guys read through these comments with our time together today. All right, I don't want to cut off anyone's reading, but you will have access to these soon. So any questions, thoughts, comments? What's top of mind for this group now that you have initially walked through the data?
Anybody have any initial thoughts they want to share? Oh, Ron has something.
So Lauren highlighted this, but I wrote it down. The top box, 9 and 10 on our recommend question, we're at 51.2 and the 75th percentile is at 54.7, about 3 or 4 points below the 75th percentile. The NPS, we're at 38.2 and the 75th percentile is at 29.7. We're almost 9 points above the 75th percentile for a total gap of 13, 14 percentage points. So that NPS that she's talking about, and those 7s and 8s, that's the difference right there is our net promoter score is, I don't know what the percentile rank is, but it's probably in the 85-ish when you think of that far above the top quartile. So that's absolutely we're celebrating, and I don't think that's very common. So
Anybody else have any initial thoughts or comments? So who's disappointed the numbers went down a little bit? Understandable. Okay, so let's really talk about what's happened this past year. I will tell you, I was at the Quest conference for Baldrige 2 weeks ago, and every industry there experienced the same thing. It was a consistent theme. Things were rough right at first with COVID, with engagement surveys. Then everybody's engagement scores went way up. Everybody was in this together. Things are going great. Now we're on the other side of COVID, and in every industry, what they're experiencing is going, we thought it was all going to be better when COVID got over. Is everything all better? No. So don't take these numbers too hard. Part of this is still pandemic effect. We have things that we can work on, and we'll work on those things. But these are not bad numbers. These are not something, when you look at your individual department results, do not look at it and go, oh, I went down from last year. Let's look at what we can control, okay? And we're going to make action plans again this year. The one thing I do want to share before we lose our NRC folks is action planning for us is we're going to take a different tact on it this year. And NRC is going to give us some help with that. We're going to reach out to them for some ideas. But we are going to use in the next 2 weeks before the updates, who's part of the leadership advisory team? Raise your hands. Oh, there are a lot more of you than a raising. HR advisory team. Yeah, sorry. Oh, that got more hands. Okay. So we're going to use you guys. And then anybody else, once you look at your results and go, hey, I want to help us do a better job with action planning this year, let me know if you want to be part of that, because we really want to take a look at how we're doing action planning, make sure what we're investing our time and resources in is really what we think is going to make the biggest difference, not just for the organization, but also within your department. So line of sight stuff. And then figuring out how do we link that throughout the year so that when we ask that question, action was taken, we made it easy for people to connect the dots, because we haven't done that perfectly in the past. Okay. Any other thoughts, questions, suggestions? I have a question or a thought. It may be both. Hold on. Here you go, ma'am.
When we took our survey last year, I was thinking it was on the heels after we had our mid-year raise. So everyone was happy and thrilled and happy to be here because everyone got a pretty good bump. And so, because I did notice that there was a higher jump last year, and this year's is pretty much even with the year prior. Yep.
So comment and thought, both, yes.
Is that a comment or a thought?
I think it's both. Anybody think we can do mid-year raises every year? Okay, just making sure. I'll turn it back over to our NRC folks to close us out.
Yes, absolutely. Well, we want to just thank this team for your time today and allowing us to present the results. Always great to be able to connect on an employee level. As you guys know, employees, associates, physicians, they drive the culture at an organization. So you're all doing the right things by asking these questions, making action plans, following up on feedback, right? That's exactly what we think really drives engagement. So congratulate yourselves on continuing down this path and really leaning into some of these results as you talk with associates or you look at these results further, as well as patient comments. And if you uncover things and you'd like support from NRC, we're happy to collaborate or provide best practices, any materials, or any trends that we're seeing. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have any further thoughts that we can help assist with.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate your expertise in all this.
All right, Penny, we'll go ahead and hop off if you don't need us for anything else.
All right, thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Nobody else is online, so I'm going to leave. All right. Announcements? No? How about announcements? Anybody have announcements? I have one quick one. So another Waste Walk item that I think it was Kathy Wright brought to us. You're in Performance Manager, when you hire a new employee, how you have a 30-day check-in task to do, and you have a 90-day check-in task to do, and then you have a 90-day introductory performance appraisal to do. Seems like a bit of a waste, huh? Thank you, Kathy, for bringing that up. Yeah, so what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of the 30 and the 90-day, and we're going to implement just a 45-day check-in. And so our leadership advisory group is getting the questions put together right now for HR, the HR leadership advisory group, of the questions for that 45-day check-in. We do still want that midpoint check-in. Sometimes, unfortunately, we do let people go in their introductory period. So we want some way of showing, no, we had this discussion, it's documented, so that if we get challenged on letting somebody go, we have documentation that says, yes, we did that. And plus, it's just another really good time to just touch base, especially at that midpoint, just to see how things are going and touch base. So thank you, Kathy. And if any of you, the rest of you, come across something and go, why do we do this? Just ask the question. Yeah.
Penny also report that on the waste block, we have 27 submissions out there. We've saved 152,000 reportedly so far in cost savings, 9,000 in revenue. It's almost over 5,000 hours saved according to 12 of the 27 that have been completed. Right now there's 7 of them that are still in new status, so they haven't been assigned and activated and put a plan in action yet. So if you've got one of those that your staff put out there in new status, it's waiting for some action for you to put a team together or delegate the responsibility and put a plan together on those. They're blue, so if they're blue, you want to make them green. And that's on you guys. So there we are.
That's awesome.
Great work going on out there.
Desiree.
What is the time frame from a 90-day to an annual?
The time frame from a 90-day to an annual depends on when they started.
Because I would have, like, I had someone that had a,
Oh, and if they should get an annual.
yes, if they should-
Okay. So that one, they should not get an annual review if they've gotten a 90-day review in the same calendar year. So in the 3 months prior to July is what we're looking at. So if they started in January, typically they get that 90-day review in 90 days. So then we wouldn't want to turn around and do a review immediately. If you find anybody that you're questioning, reach out to your HR business partner and we can take a look at it.
if they were I think this is maybe why it happened, I had a transfer, so I had a 90-day meeting, a 90-day review, and an annual.
Which is a bit much.
Well, it didn't all take time.
Yeah. Yeah, so the 90-day, the 90-day meeting will go away. The 90-day introductory is different than the annual. So for somebody who's been with us for a long time, we probably still want to do that annual because that's where we're asking people what are their career growth goals? Because it might be this new job, but it might be even beyond that. So it's just a good touch base to see, where do they want to go from here?
So we would have them both?
You could have them both if it's a transfer. Anybody else? Anyone else?
And just a question.
Yeah. Kathy's going to give me another waste walk item right now.
I don't like this very much, sure if it's a question or a thought, but action was taken as a result of our last survey. 41% said neither.
Right.
Of that 41%, do we know what the longevity is of those employees?
And we can't, so her question was action was taken on the last survey. 41% said neither. So she's asking, what's the longevity of those people? So in our data file that we feed into the system, we can do cross-tab queries, and that's part of what we're going to do with the HR advisory group, is look at some of those things where we're looking at tenure, because if it is all new people, then that's explainable. If our senior people, though, or people who have been here a long time are going, yeah, either no, or I don't know if we did or not, then that's something we need to look at and say, how do we do better? And we still need to figure out how to do better, because even for a new person, if we can explain to them, hey, the reason we're doing this is because of feedback we received from staff last year, that helps them see that there's that linkage every year. So it is something we can improve on. Any other announcements? No? Okay. So you should have access to your survey online. If you don't have it by tomorrow, give us a call. Your comments will be coming to you yet today, so you can take a look at those. If you want to talk about those at all, give us a call then too. Amber?
No.
No?
Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
Thanks, everybody.